And then, of course, we'll give you all the resources you need to meet with your legislator, which we're going to share with you now. So next slide. So, we're going to give you some really good talking points. Tracy has developed a very specific talking points document that the captains, I believe, will be receiving. If they haven't, they've already received. Delegates will receive as well. We'll give you by issue some specific talking points, but just overall to frame it, we really want to talk about we are a vital industry and workforce, but we've also are vulnerable. And we certainly have seen that in this last 2 years, and we'll share more specifics about that. And then there are specifically 5 budget or legislative items that we're going to highlight. There are over 2,000 bills introduced every year. We certainly can't have a meeting with the legislator and be like, here's 12 things we want you to focus on for us. It's way too much. You have to prioritize. So if there's things that you are interested in that are happening in the legislature, but we're not including here, doesn't mean you can't necessarily bring those up, but we're going to ask that you certainly prioritize what we've identified. Next slide. And again, if you can mute Martha, if you're not talking, that would be great. So here's just to give you an overview of how we are. California is an economic creative industry is an economic powerhouse. Here's some recent data. So there's 2 different data points that we're sharing here. One is the US Bureau of Economic Analysis, which comes out of DC. This is specifically arts and culture, not the whole of the creative industries, okay? So that is a $232 billion industry here in the state of California. It's about a little under 7.5% of California's economy, and it includes 681,000 jobs in 2020. These are just released numbers in March. And what I wanted to highlight, and you'll see this a couple of times, is we are actually down 100,000 jobs between 2019 and 2020. And that is really critical to a number of our asks on why we need to rebuild the creative workforce. In addition, you also have the Otis Report that just came out, which we encourage you to download and take a look. It's a 260-page document, but they have summaries as well. And in that, they talk about the whole of the creative economy. So that's everything from architecture, fashion, gaming, entertainment industry, film industry, which of course is a large percentage of these numbers. And as you can see, that's a massive impact economically, and includes almost 2 million creative economy jobs. And then there's sort of the value added supporting other jobs, which is close to 4 million. So really it's what you're comfortable talking about in terms of introducing. We certainly all talk about being a part of the creative economy, which are those larger numbers. But if you're representing an arts and culture organization, you are also doing really impactful economic heavy work. And some of you may even have data in your local district. If you have data from your specific local district, some of you, like David, runs Yuba Sutter Arts, maybe your arts council has done some specific local economic impact studies. Be sure to get that data before you go in. All right, and share that with your legislators. Next slide. And by the way, this is a meeting. I'll talk for a bit. We're gonna go through this and we'll have tons of time for questions. So you can either start putting them in the chat or just save them for in a bit. So again, between 2019 and 2020, we lost 100,000 jobs in arts and culture in the state of California. The United States arts economy shrunk at nearly twice the rate of the economy as a whole. Unemployment in the arts was double that of overall national unemployment. It was even harder and worse for Black, Indigenous, Asian, multiracial, and disabled individuals within the sector. And we cite where this data is coming from. We're also seeing, and we're continuing to hear about, attendance and ticket revenues have not rebounded at the levels that we had seen in 2019 and prior to the pandemic. And also, we also saw that the pandemic really highlighted what we knew, but really now have spotlighted, which is that there are terrible structural inequities within the creative workforce with a lack of racial diversity, low and stagnant wages, and employment insecurity, which we would say is due to chronic undercapitalization and of arts and culture organizations, which we are all trying to solve. Next slide. So in terms of what are our 5 specific asks that we're talking about today, one is to increase the baseline funding for the California Arts Council from 66 cents or $26 million a year to $40 million a year, or $1 for the arts per capita. And we're going to get into more specifics on each of these. We last year worked hard to get the first Creative Workforce Act passed in the United States, which the governor signed on October 9th, but it was upon appropriation. In other words, it needed to have a budget attached to it. Last year it did not. So this year, Senator Allen has submitted a letter asking his budget chairs on the Senate side to include $50 million to fund the California Creative Workforce Act. The governor has included $30 million for cultural districts over 3 years. That would also go to the California Arts Council to expand the pilot program, as well as with the 14 existing, as well as expand the overall. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about it. We're asking also in our 5 highlights, the 2 pieces of legislation that the legislature and the governor sign. Senate Bill 1116, brought forward by Senator Anthony Portantino from Los Angeles, which is the Performing Arts Equitable Payroll Fund, which we'll talk a little bit about more as well. And then pass and fund Senate Bill 963, brought forward by Senator John Laird, for $125 million for the California Cultural and Heritage Endowment Fund under Natural Resources Agency. So those are the 5, but I'm going to go into a little bit more detail next slide. So just let's go quickly on through these, but I mean, I don't have to go quickly. I mean, so this is really the meat of this, which is the dollar for the arts. So the baseline funding. So last year we got $100 million increase to the funding for the California Arts Council, but 60 million of it was for the California Creative Core Pilot Program, and 40 million was for creative youth development. It did not change the baseline local assistance funding that many of us depend upon in general operating support, et cetera. It has remained the same for 3 years at $26 million. Just to also note, the state of California has reported a $50 billion budget surplus this year. And this is from tax rolls and all of that sort of stuff. So this is the time that we need to see this increase. We want that ask to happen. We think of it as a modest increase based on all those economic impact numbers to see it go from $26 million to $40 million annually. We're asking for that over the next 3 years. So in other words, increase it from 26 to 40 million over the next 3 years. So that is a $42 million total budget ask that we're asking for the dollar for the arts. And part of the reason, some of the talking points that you'll get is that this is local assistance funding. So when you're talking to your local elected official, this actually helps your local community by getting funding directly into these communities, number one. Number two, it is really needed. This funding for California Arts Council is consistently oversubscribed. 58% of CAC grant applicants were denied due to lack of funding in 2021. Over 3,000 artists applied for artist grants, and fewer than 200 were granted because of lack of funding. So these are some of the critical points that you can utilize to say there is a need. It is not that there isn't a need for this increase. And it's about equity, right? A lot of times what happens is that you'll see funding going into a community, $8 million for this particular project in a legislator's community. We're not against what they call district acts and earmarks, but what's critically important about the California Arts Council is that it is an adjudicated grant process. And so therefore it is not, there is more equity built into it not being just a line item.
I'll be down here shortly. I'll see you there. Huh?
Hey, David, can you mute, please?
Yeah.
That just a legislator does. So, and then just a quick thing too, in a muted recovery, this is from McKinsey & Company, which is a high-level consulting company. They say it's going to take 5 years.
You're the leader. I'll follow your lead.
For arts and entertainment industries to get back to the 2019 level contributions to GDP. Hey, my team can, okay, David, you guys can have the power to mute people. So do it if they keep talking. Next slide. You have the power. So this is just some graphs that will show you on the left kind of the most recent data in terms of where we stand in terms of our GDP, the number of jobs. This is, again, Bureau of Economic Analysis. This is straight jobs that are in the NAICS codes, in this industrial classification system. It shows that our economic contribution is ahead of retail, construction, and transportation combined. So massive impact. But then it shows on the right, the column where we are in terms of baseline funding. This is still the dollar for the arts conversation. And you can see back in the year 2000, we actually had more funding for the arts than we have currently in baseline funding, right? And if you adjust for inflation, that should actually be at 44 million, almost $45 million. Then there was that very sad period for 10 years where we were at $1 million. And then and I say we because California Arts Advocacy, the lobbying organization, really worked hard, and people like Rick Stein and others on this call, to see that stair step happen, where we saw the increase year after year until 2019, when we've basically seen it remain steady except for these one-time infusions. Now, that's not to say we're not grateful for the 100 million last year, but we want to see is that yellow bar at the bottom. We want to see it to go to $40 million. And just for comparison, state of Minnesota invests over $6 per person in arts and culture. New York and Massachusetts is over $2. This is baseline funding. And California currently is at 66 cents, or 28th in the United States. Clearly, with the dollar, we would see an increase. Okay, next slide. Yes, Chris, the slides will be available. I'm sorry for that. We had some technical issues, so we're figuring that out. The next issue that we'll be asking you to talk about in your meetings or to send in letters around is the California Creative Workforce Act of 2021. Many of you worked on this with us last year to get that through the legislature. I think it was 8 different meetings we had to get through, and then have the governor sign it, and he finally did, which was super exciting. It's the first one in the United States that declares that creative arts workforce development is a state priority. Those words alone are a game changer. We are now able to get ourselves in the room in other funding pots when we're talking about workforce development. And I have that on authority from someone inside who tells me that this is really useful language when she's trying to. So that, however, this program was signed, but it has not been launched because it doesn't have any funding attached to it. So this year now, the next step on this process is we're asking for $50 million to launch it. This describes how it would work, which is it would go to the California Arts Council. They would work in collaboration with the California Workforce Development Board to develop a program where people who traditionally face barriers to employment into the creative industries would be able to be hired between 12 and 24 months for earn and learn, so on the job learning opportunities with living wages. And that's a very, very important piece of it. And so that's a lot of what that bill talks about. And the next slide, I think it says, we've estimated that with 50 million, we could actually get 1,000 new jobs in the state of California. And I know $20 an hour doesn't sound like a lot in Los Angeles or San Francisco. That's the average living wage hourly in the whole of California. So in other words, it would be higher in Los Angeles and San Francisco than it would be in places like, Yuba Sutter and Nevada County, or Shasta and places like that. There's some other facts there. Again, the 100,000 job loss is a critical piece of it, and diversifying the arts and creating a new pipeline of creative workers is a big piece of what we're trying to do here. It's jobs creation, bottom line. So that's what we want to see there. Next slide, sorry, just reading questions. Then the governor has 3 things that he put in his January budget proposal. In May, we'll learn what's in what they call the May revise. So we'll see if these are still in there, or if they've changed, or if they've increased, for example, or if he's including other issues that we're hoping, like the dollar for the arts. But in his January proposal, he included the $30 million for cultural districts, $173,000 for the California Poet Laureate and Youth Poet Laureate program. It's essentially a staff position at California Arts Council to manage those programs. And then $50 million for arts installations in parks that would go to Parks and Recs. And so next slide. Because again, you can't talk about everything in a meeting because some of these meetings are going to be 15 minutes, half an hour, maybe. So, you know, we would love for you to focus on the cultural districts program, because this has been an unfunded legislative mandate since 2015, where it went to the CAC to do a pilot. They then did a study. They've learned that it certainly was not racially diverse enough to really reflect who is in the state of California. The original proposal in 2017 that was written by Maria Rosario Jackson, who's now the head of the NEA, and Jessica Cusick. There is great data, great reporting, great stuff to build out this program to really enhance and contain our cultural communities, so that it's not about displacement, but it's actually about enhancement. And certainly our job also, if the funding comes through, will be to hold the California Arts Council accountable to ensuring that we see equity in this development of this program. But we're very excited that the governor is hoping to support this. There are probably about 20 other states in the United States that have cultural districts programs that are funded. And this is what finally we would hope to see. Next slide. And then this is just quickly the others, the Poet Laureate program. I don't think that's going to be a problem, honestly. So I don't think you need to focus on $173,000 in a $286 billion California budget. I'm pretty sure this one will slide on through. And then the state's Parks partnership, we're excited about, we're supportive, but you know, there's so many other things that we just are not going to prioritize this in our conversations. If that goes through, it's great, wonderful. It creates arts installations and parks, but there are things that we really need, like general operating support in the dollar for the arts and sustained funding over 3 years. And, you know, some of the other things that we're going to talk about in a second that we would want to prioritize. Next slide. So, and many of the folks on this call, Martha Dempson is really much more of a spokesperson for this bill than I am, but we're excited to lend our support to it, which is the Performing Arts Equitable Payroll Fund, Senate Bill 1116. This came out of the SB 805 coalition work of last year. That was a bill sponsored by Senator Susan Rubio. This comes out of years of organizations really trying to address the impact of Assembly Bill 5. Oops. If you can mute so I don't hear myself echo, that would be awesome, Michelle. On the impact of small budget nonprofit arts, performing arts organizations. It is, again, this is not an exemption from AB 5. This is actually a capitalization of the small budget nonprofit performing arts organizations to be able to afford to pay wages to artists and production people on these larger, you know, performance based for performing arts based organizations. We think this is terrific. This is an exciting and really great solution to a problem, and legislation tries to solve. We expect any day now there will be a budget asked to accompany this, but until that's been introduced, I don't feel comfortable presenting that. And when we get through to it, maybe Martha can talk a little bit more about that in a second, but we'll keep going to the next slide. And then there's also Senate Bill 963. I think I saw Amy from Bakersfield Museum here. California Association of Museums is this, I should have said on Senate Bill 1116, the theater producers of Southern California and Actors Equity are the sponsors of that bill. California Arts Advocacy is a supporter. In this bill, Senate Bill 963, which is would put in another $50 million towards the museum grant program and $75 million towards the California Cultural Heritage Endowment. and then some language to actually, improve the process and around museum grants and other things, is sponsored by the California Association of Museums. And we are happy to support this and include this in our legislative asks. And so there's some more information about that here. But again, California Association Museum will have more information that we will link to. And we have fact sheets as well that we'll link to in these decks. Next slide. Oh, great. Hey, I did it in half an hour. Woohoo. Okay. So now we're at the point where you guys can ask questions. So we're going to get rid of the slide deck so we can see everybody. Oh, join us. Yes. Become a member, all that good stuff. We need your support. Yes, 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 of course. But really what we want to focus on is engaging you guys in this. So let's go ahead and kill the slide deck, and let's see what kind of questions everybody has. Hello, nice to see everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of Arts, Culture, and Creativity Month and Advocacy Week. Yay, very excited. And the other stuff that we also will really ask you to do is share social media next week. We will have a letter writing campaign specifically on our asks for the $1 and 628 funding. We'll have links to the other 3 priority issues as well. Cultural districts will have a link to a letter you can do. SB 1116 will link you out to their portal, and 963 for museums. But we ask that you also share that out. Critical mass, that's what we need to get these things moving through the legislature. So Artemis asks, what methods have you found legislators want to best, or written and mailed letters appropriate? Really, Artemis, what we typically are doing these days is email letters. It's just fast. They're used to it. Honestly, what they pretty much do is they log it. They log how many letters. It's really about a volume. How many letters and phone calls are they getting, particularly in district? And then, so if you're registering those in district too, if you make the phone calls in district, they send that up to the Sacramento office, and they're like, hey, people are calling about this particular issue, and they log it. They literally say how many people are calling about arts investments, how many people are calling about housing and that sort of thing. So that helps them to understand what are the priorities in their districts. So so letters that we'll send through systems to make it easy for folks, and then for sure phone calling, and of course these legislative visits are very, very important.
Okay, can I ask one other thing, or should I enter it in the chat?
No, go for it, and then we'll go to other folks who have their hands raised.
So there are a lot of topics, obviously, that we want to get their attention on and bring to their attention. How do I do it without just feeling like I'm dropping a ton of bricks on them? Like, how do you kind of trickle out all of these requests? Do you establish a relationship in each call? You kind of throw it in? Like, how do you get it in before time is out without sounding disingenuous? You know what I mean? I want them to feel like we genuinely wanted to get funded, not just like we're reading a script each time. I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely. No, that's a great question. I think that, that's why we prioritize 5. There's even more we could have thrown in.
Yeah.
But there's 5 there. I think it's a matter of, obviously California Arts Advocates, our primary issues are the $1 for the arts and 628 funding. Those are our main issues that we're going to give you lots of talking points on, and we'll hope that, you'll also prioritize. You'll have the others, like, I know, there's a lot of people who, if you're a museum, you're going to talk about museums, and the museum funding. If you're in a cultural district, I would imagine you're going to talk about funding the cultural districts.
Yeah.
Like Artemis, you're in a cultural district. So you're going to want to talk about that. So you can talk from the heart. You don't have to get to everything, because you're going to send them a follow-up. Right. And we're going to provide that with you. And then you're going to send a nice follow-up that says, here's the comprehensive thing. Right. You're also going to get letters. What's most important is that they're hearing from the arts. The worst thing that we ever hear is, we're not hearing from the arts. Right. That's the worst. Whether it's really granular and specific is less important in those calls. They'll be taking notes, especially if you're with a staff person, they're taking notes the whole time. But really the follow-up that you're sending is where you're going to give them the meat of the issue.
I see. Okay, cool.
All right. Lenore,
all right, cool. Thank you.
Of course. Lenore, I see your hand up. Unmute. 2 years in.
Sorry.
No.
Thank you. Hi, Julie.
Hi.
My question is this. for example, I am not only an individual, I'm affiliated with organizations that are networks. Are you already reaching out to various networks to have all their members participate in this? Or if we're supposed to do it, how do we know somebody else isn't doing it?
Well, first of all,
You understand what I mean?
absolutely. So first of all, yes, I mean, you see me on the listserv for Cal presenters, for example.
Right.
I certainly try, but it never hurts to have more people asking people to engage. I don't think that that's a problem. I also think that in your meetings, for example, you can say, I represent this many organizations when I'm coming to you today as the person from Cal presenters or whatever else it is. It's not a problem if you feel that you can do that as well. But you can share out to other networks. We appreciate it. A lot of times, what's the rule? It takes like 7 or 8 times before somebody takes action.
Right.
So we absolutely need your help to amplify this. And even if we've already told people to do it, it helps if it's another colleague who says you should do it. And I trust these folks, they're good, that sort of thing. So.
Okay, because I was thinking, for example, I'm a coach consultant at Intersection. And I'm not sure that they're on this list. I don't even see many familiar San Francisco names here of folks.
Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty tight group here of the folks that really, and thank you, all of you. I think that about 70 registered for this. There are a lot of other people who Intersection's a member, they're engaged,
Right.
They do pay attention to things, but they don't always, not everyone shows up for all of these. So, but again, please absolutely amplify. The more voices saying how critical this is, more likely people will take action.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Veronica, I like your background.
Thank you. You know where I got it from. Good afternoon to everyone. This is my first event with CFTA. I'm really excited and I'm in full support of what you've presented today as a performing arts educator and arts education consultant. However, I'm wondering how we will lobby for more arts funding in schools, particularly knowing that there's an arts and music initiative that we're trying to get on the June ballot. So I'm wondering how or if we can even speak to that aspect. Just like to hear about that.
Great question, Veronica. And again, just because the nature of who we are and what we prioritize, that was not in the top 5. It didn't make it to the top 5, as it were. However, as you mentioned, there's the ballot measure. You absolutely should bring that up. If that's your passion and you're going to get legislative meeting, or you're making a phone call to your elected official, or you want to do anything, bring it up. Absolutely. Let them know how important that is. There was also funding that the governor put in his January budget, and it'll be interesting to see if it's in the May revise. That is for, they call it ELOP. I'm trying to remember what that stands for. Learning opportunities. Anyway, I'll remember. And it started off as almost $1 billion in K-6 after school and summer programs for arts and music and I think the recent number I saw was closer to 700 million. It's still a tremendous amount of money that would then go to local control to disseminate, I think is how it would work. So I'll try to find, we're trying to kind of weed through where that is in the process, to be honest with you. And we'll see if it ends up in the May revise. But I think the bottom line is this for everyone who's here, is that you have to speak to what matters to you. Obviously, we're going to give you the talking points. We're going to give you the things that we as the state advocacy organization are tracking and think have a chance with support to get through. But if you as an arts educator don't see, specifically, talk about how critically important that is, and you want to make sure that that is, funded and et cetera. So.
Thank you for that. I mean, I know we want to perpetuate the arts, period, and investing in the next generation and future generations is essential. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. And Create California, our partners there have also, Tracy, you will also share with them the sheet that Create created. that has the issues that they're tracking. So we'll also share that with everyone, and that'll be in the folders. Other questions or anything anyone else would like to add?
Richard had a question in the chat about how the postcard party works. If I could just take a moment. There's a toolkit. We put a link, and you can download. It's a printable front and back postcard you take to your local printer. And there's a link to find the legislators, and we are including the talking points so that you can communicate those as well in that folder. And if you have any other questions about that, feel free to either, I'll put my email in the chat or.
Yeah, the only thing that I'm thinking of with that, because I mean, number one, you know me, I love to have fun. So I'm thinking about, printing out a big old postcard, inviting all my artist friends together, have a big old gathering. And I envision like one big postcard that everybody can sign or something like that, and then drop it off at, District 7 office, District 9 office, Richard Pan's office, whatever kind of thing like that, with some kind of creative stamp or something like that. So it was just a thought, because I love to have fun.
Richard, there you go, being creative again. And we love that. And I'll tell you, one of the things is that, the arts should stand out, and all of you as art people and artists, utilize your practice to speak in your voice. I'm basically, I'm a professional advocate. That's what I do. So I'm not an artist, but I look to you guys to do it in your voice, your practice. Come in, speak in do a monologue in your meeting, do a poem, record a video, send it to them. You can, this is the other thing, is you can record a cool monologue video and send it to your elected official and be like, the arts, be creative. Absolutely. Utilize your tools in your practice.
Come on,
David.
poets. Come on, poets.
Come on, poets. David.
Thank you, Julie. As you know, we're fortunate, we're close enough to Sacramento that we're having our meetings next week with our Assemblyman Gallagher on Monday live in his office in Sacramento, and then on Wednesday with Senator Nielsen. And I was just curious, is there any, when we did our research for our local cultural study in our two counties, we had looked at some other studies that showed a return on investment, if you will, putting it into really cold business terms. And I want to say it was $3 for every dollar in the, invested in the arts in whatever manner, came back to the community. But the multipliers are pretty good. Are there any current numbers that you've seen in any studies that maybe we could make reference to? I know it's kind of broad and general, but anything?
Yeah, there's a couple of different numbers that, there's the one on, it's like for every ticket, there's another $31 spent in the community. And then there's the other one that's more like for every dollar invested, like federal dollar invested. I think NEA has a number. There's another I want to say it's $9. I'm just going off the top of my head.
I'll do some extra research. Yeah,
we'll get that too. I'm sure we have it. I know we have it.
That's maybe not critical, and both of our legislators know our communities, know us very well, and we're fortunate in that regard. And yeah, it was funny. Speaking of NEA, we're one of the recipients of the grant. So we're giving out $100,000 in our community to various local arts organizations. So we're going to make those announcements in the next week. So that's an easy one to show, hey, keep us alive as the local arts agency, affiliate of the California Arts Council in our case, because we can do these kinds of things. And since our counties kick in little or nothing each year, we get a little bit, but nothing from the standpoint of what we bring in from the state and federal government. So
absolutely.
I want to look at it. I want to add that to our not to our monologue. We've got a great group of delegates going, and there's about a half a dozen of us. We've got both of our county representatives, Yuba County supervisor and Sutter County supervisors, joining us along with our 3 full-time staff people.
Awesome.
another
And
board
Nielsen
member.
is an important, he's co-chair of budget committee, and he's an important, and he's a wonderful supporter and bipartisan supporter of the arts. So that's great.
Absolutely. Should be fun. Thank you.
And I will get to the question in the chat about the venues grant. We definitely have some news on that. So, but in the meantime, I see Amy, you have your hand up. I'll go there first.
I do. Just a quick question. Is there anybody who's got a meeting scheduled for Monday? Mine is scheduled for Tuesday afternoon, and I would love to be a fly on the wall. I happen to be one of those that learn by participating. So if anybody has one scheduled for Monday, I would love to just sit in on it and just kind of see how it all works. I've participated on American Alliance of Museums Advocacy Days, but this is really kind of my first foray into this.
Awesome. Well, welcome and thanks for doing it. It's actually quite fun. I can tell you that for those who are new, sometimes you're a little nervous at first, but most of the time, again, a lot of times you're going to get a staffer. So don't be surprised if you do, and recognize how critical they are to the process. And if you get an elected official, remember that most of them, well, they're all just regular people. And they also are your elected officials. So they are there to represent you, and they're very happy to hear from you. That is something that they want.
I want to respond. Can I respond to one more chat item? Someone is asking about our letter writing and resources for letter writing. We're going to put a link in the chat to sign up for action alerts, and from that we'll send you notices of opportunities to send templated letters to governor and legislators, as well as scripts for phone calls, things like that. So we'll drop that in the chat for you. Thank you for that question.
And I'll tell you, the other thing I just want to share too, in my experience in doing a lot of these now, is that it's really, particularly for the in-district stuff, it is really much more that they're hearing from their local constituents, that you're telling local impact story, than it is about the data points on $31 or any of that sort of stuff. They get that. They get that from us. They get that from the professional lobbying advocacy organizations on a pretty regular basis. What they want to hear is from you and what you're doing to make their community more viable, safer, better, happier, joy, jobs, all of the stuff that we know the arts are doing. I wanted to address the venues, California Venues Grant program and what we're doing on that. Absolutely. I mean, Terry Ball and I are deep in this. I don't think Casey's here. I don't know, Casey was going to come, or Casey, are you here? And so, yeah,
Yes.
Here he is. Casey's here.
Yeah, he is.
From Neva, California. So we are deep in the process of lobbying to get some cleanup cleanup legislation to that budget item from last year. So if you are in limbo because of what is the NAICS code, which is a North American Industrial Classification System, that had a very limited number in the authorizing legislation for the Venues Grant program. And if you're a nonprofit, most of us don't even know what our NAICS code is. And they use a process to try and figure out whether or not you're legitimate and all of this sort of stuff. So we've written language to try and really broaden that, not only to have many more NAICS codes, but also that they would actually have to look at the 990s and see if your description in the 990 fits into a description of what is a NAICS code. Okay, so we're trying to have as much backup as possible. And Neva, California, and California Arts Advocates have been working directly with the administration, California Office of Small Business Advocate. We've got direct lines to the director there. They want to get the money out the door. Let me just assure you, they're not wanting this to happen. And the legislature is aware of it, particularly on the Senate side. So here's what I'm going to tell you. If you are somebody who has received and are frustrated by this process, when you're in your legislative meeting, or if you're making phone calls next week, you can certainly mention it and say, please prioritize cleanup of this bill in the cycle this year. So you can talk about it. We can follow up. Anyone who has questions about that specifically, Amy, I think I see you nodding, and a couple others. go ahead and email me and we'll give you what you can say, the language. Casey, do you want to add anything to that?
No, just as far as I know, that was a good summary, Julie. As far as I know, we're, I think we're just subject to this budget process. It's not as fast as we would like it to be, but every interaction and engagement we've had, especially on the Senate side, has been positive. They get it. It's on their radar. They're saying it's going to happen. It just has to go through the process that we're subject to. So that's looking like potentially June is when that will happen. So, but I think it's just frustrating. New program, middle of COVID, tried to push it out quick, and they're like, well, of course there's going to be technical cleanup. So I think that's kind of where we're at. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. And Martha, I did actually share that language with you in the email exchange today with Crystal. It's one of the attachments. Martha, is there anything you want to share about Senate Bill 1116? Martha is the brains behind that operation.
No, I think you did a great job of summarizing. I did want to know whether we can use the California finally making workforce development, creative workforce development a priority, whether we can use that in our advocacy to say, we have historically been excluded from all federal workforce development dollars. This is an important industry for California. We need to write this because if we want the future to remain here, we need to invest in the workforce development piece of it. You think that's okay?
It's a law. Yeah. You can use it. Use it. That's why we fought for it.
Will you be sending out information on how the capitalization of cultural districts will be allocated? Like if there is any, like who would be administering that, or is it already determined where that money would go, or how would the money be spent?
Yeah, it hasn't been determined. So that's the California Arts Council's job, is to figure that out. And that's where there was a study done in 2019 that talked about, the problems with the pilot program. And John Moscone, as you guys know, is now the new director of the California Arts Council. We're very, very excited about that. We think he's going to, just be a great leader there. Certainly a huge champion for equity. And he really has seen the benefits of the Cultural Districts program in San Francisco specifically. So they would develop that program. They are being questioned. So what happens is the governor introduces, Martha, you know this, but if the governor introduces something in January, it then goes to budget subcommittees for them to determine and ask that state agency about that program. So that goes to like Wendy Carrillo is the assembly chair for sub 4 on the assembly side, and on the Senate side, it's Sydney Kahnlager is the chair. So they would hear these issues. And so the Arts Council has to present. And like Wendy Carrillo said, well, how is that 30 million going to be spent? Right? Just like I think Martha, you were essentially asking, they didn't quite have an answer for that yet. And so how much of that gets decided in the budget process? The Arts Council often doesn't have as prescriptive language in the budget process because so much of their stuff is done with the council. It's how the authorizing legislation for the Arts Council has been determined. When you're going through Cal OSBA, the Office of Small Business Advocate, like SB 1116 would go through, you want to be as prescriptive as possible because they don't have a council. They only take what's in the legislation and they apply what's in the legislation. It's not to say that the Arts Council doesn't, but typically what happens in language for the Arts Council, it's very general, right? So that they can make those determinations. So if that's too much information into the weeds, sorry. Other questions, comments? Excited? Some of you have your backgrounds. Love it. Excited. Mara's excited. Mara. Nice. Thank you. Nice to see you. Awesome. We're super excited. Again, what we're going to ask is you guys, hey, all of you are our core. We love you. Thank you so much. What we do ask again is for you to really amplify. So next week, you're going to see us send out email blasts that are going to ask people to start sending in letters. And I can tell you again, last year when we had almost 5,000 letters sent in, when we met with the governor's office, they literally said, yes, we know. Like, we know what you want, and that's what we want. We want them to know, and we want them to hear from us. If they don't hear from us, and you've heard me say this before, they will not make the prioritization of arts and culture on their own. It is only if we really shout it from the rooftops and tell them that it's a priority for their constituents and their communities that they will say that this is important. So that's where you all come in. So thank you. Thank you. Tracy.
I just wanted to, I've been trying my best to keep up with any comments and questions in the chat, but if I miss anything, if you could speak up and make sure that you, get what you need from us. Just wanted to open the floor up for anybody that maybe got overlooked in the chat. Cool.
And thank you, Tracy and Eduardo and Kara from our team who have been working really, really hard all month for Arts, Culture, and Creativity Month and putting all of this together at the same time. We're in the background changing our systems and doing all that good stuff as you grow an organization. So that's sometimes the little hiccups. So bear with us when you see those. And also please, and hey, Matt was with us, who was with us last year on the team. And give us feedback too. We want feedback. We want to know how we can improve things for you. We exist to do this. This is our job. So, give us the feedback during, after, before, whenever you want to give it to us. We want to hear from you. So reach out. All right. Anyone want to, take us away with a song or, poem? Little dance moves. Okay. All right. You guys.
Thank you, everyone.
So much. Have fun and report back. Take photos, report back. Tell us how it goes. Take lots of pictures. Have a good time. And Richard, I look forward to the enormous postcard. See you soon.
Thank you.